complete is for me similar to feeling whole at any given moment. It's really not linear, like a horizontal linear having completed something. It's like sensing myself in a more spherical whole way, and that wholeness, the completeness, keeps changing and increasing. But at any point, I can experience the phenomenon of complete. Gets all the benefits of exercise. Rat number 2 gets all the downsides of your stress with the same exact muscle expenditure and movements going on. Read examples that it's the interpretation in your head. And I haven't kept up with that literature, but I'll bet you rat number 2 is having a whole lot more activity in its amygdala than is rat number 1. I'm reasonably good at telling people what's going to happen if they don't manage their stress, but I'm terrible at actually managing stress or advising how to manage it. I'm much better with the bad news aspect of it. But what you see is by now just a classic literature, half a century old, sort of showing what are the building blocks of stress.
What are the building blocks of stress?
more than one way that the world can go on from any given instant of time, like a road forking, or is there just one way? If there's just one way the world can go on, well, that's determinism. If determinism is true, then the present state of the world is a consequence of the way of two things. A, the way the world was at some time in the past, say 1 billion years ago, and B, the laws of nature, or the laws of physics. Now, neither of these things is anything I have any choice about.
interdisciplinary topic in the realm of drugs than psychedelics. I mean, psychedelics cross-cut so many interesting domains in our own Western cultural history. They really exploded on the scene in the 1960s and were associated with some really radical changes to society. And what really is most interesting to me, as someone who's really focused on the effects of drugs on behavior, whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly, psychedelics are the only drug class that I know of where you have not just one or two, but lots of stories of people saying they took this thing one time, sometimes decades ago, maybe 50 years ago, and they say it had this profound impact on the course of their entire
Hume's example.
The analogy between a person and a nation. A nation consists in a group of people living together on a territory. Now, I don't think the nation is that territory, and I don't think the nation is that group of people. But the existence of a nation doesn't involve anything over and above a group of people living on a territory. And that's the way I think we should think about person. I'm not just this physical object. I'm not a series of experiences. But there's nothing more to my existence than a series of thoughts and experiences that are closely connected to this body, to this body.
Imagine a more interdisciplinary topic in the realm of drugs than psychedelics. I mean,
psychedelics cross-cut so many interesting domains in our own, Western cultural history.
They really
exploded on the scene in the 1960s and were associated with some really radical changes to society. And what really is most interesting to me, as someone who's really focused on the effects of drugs on behavior, whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly, or whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly, or whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly, or it's the good, the bad, the ugly. Psychedelics are the only drug class that I know of where you have not just one or two, but lots of stories of people saying they took this thing one time, sometimes decades ago, maybe 50 years ago, and they say it had this profound impact on the course of their entire life.
philosophy deals with are the assumptions on which a great many normal beliefs rest. Not the sort of things which people like to dig up, because people sometimes don't really want their assumptions examined over much. Because people are all uncomfortable when they're made to look into what really their beliefs rest on. But in fact, the sort of assumptions which a great many ordinary common sense beliefs rest are matters for philosophical analysis. When looked at, they turn out to be a great deal less secure, a great deal more complicated than they seem at first. And philosophers, by examining these, teach people self-knowledge. They explain to them, sometimes in a very illuminating way, what they believe and why they believe it. This is a very central task.
If they're tagging old memories with anxiety, then you have to do something about it, or you will be tortured by those memories forever, because that's how the alarm system works. And so maybe you need to go back there and clean things up. You got to figure out, okay, well, how did this happen? What sort of role did I play? Even if it's a minor role, that doesn't matter, because the point is that you don't want to be put in the same vulnerable position again. So anything you can do to strengthen yourself is good. You know, and often if it's a really old memory, like maybe you were a child, you're not a child now, so you probably have a variety of techniques at hand that you could use to deal with a situation like that if it came up now. And so you have to update that part of your brain that still thinks you're 4. And lots of people have parts of them that are still stuck in some traumatic.
first thing that you might want to note about postmodernism is that it doesn't have a shred of gratitude. And there's something pathologically wrong with a person who doesn't have any gratitude, especially when they live in what so far is the best of all possible worlds. And so if you're not grateful, you're driven by resentment, and resentment is about the worst emotion that you can possibly experience apart from arrogance. Resentment, arrogance, and deceit. There's an evil triad for you. And if you're bitter about everything that's happening around you, despite the fact that you're bathed in wealth,
Then there's something else, something else, there's something else.
Because all of our knowledge and experience comes to us through our sensory and mental apparatus, it all comes to us in forms which are sense-dependent and mind-dependent.
Yes.
And that we have no direct access to things as they are in themselves, independently of all possible experience. Now, given that the modes of apprehension that we have are whatever they are, possible experience must, as it were, fit in with them to be able to be experienced for us at all. And part of his project as a philosopher, therefore, was to carry out a large-scale investigation into what the nature of these forms was.
Yes.
And if that investigation is successful and complete, it will tell us what the limits of all possible knowledge is.